we're out here on all this land and we have all this privacy and nobody's interfering with us. And it's kind of like you get to be your own little fiefdom.
They taught us to kind of not care about the worldly stuff. Like, we didn't concentrate a lot on shopping or clothes or fashion, but building stuff, doing things together, building a garden, long-term stuff, you know.
That even though at the time we didn't know it, but we were growing into good, productive people.
Waking up at 7 o'clock every morning in the summer and go weed the garden. I knew there was some sort of purpose in that. I hated doing it. Everybody hated it.
It's your responsibility to take care of your family, no matter what. No matter what is happening around you, it's your responsibility. And he always took that very seriously.
Both of them, you know, I remember Mama saying that her brothers and sisters were the best friends that she had. And there would be other people in your life. They'll come and go, but nobody is going to take away your brothers and sisters. They're always going to be with you. No matter where you go, no matter what you do, you're always going to be brothers and sisters, and that was the tie that lasted. And so you might as well just learn to get along, because that's what you got.
And she would make our friends work. You know, if our friends were over, you know, they were out mowing too. And I come home from school all the time, and Sam Heathcote's out in the front yard just mowing. We're like, oh, hey, Sam.
You know, when we first moved here, we had Toby. And Toby, that dog, he would break through our fence at the old house and he'd hit two, boards with his head at the same time, and he'd crack through both of them, and he'd go running to freedom out at the college, and he would just run, and Daddy would wake up and he'd be like, dang, that dog, I gotta fix the fence again. And so when we moved out here, Toby ran for like a week, and then he just laid down in front of the driveway, and he hardly ever moved after that. It's just like, got it out of his system. And I think, our family was kind of the same way. We're kind of pent up being in the city, but, being out in the country just gives you enough space to have projects and have interests and things that are different, and Mom and Daddy wanted to give that gift to us. And
I had the opportunity to build tree houses wherever I wanted. I love to build things, and I got that opportunity in the country, I think. So I think it's a good choice.
It is the ultimate playground. You can do whatever. There's probably at least 7 or 8 old broken down forts down by the creek and around the property, and tree houses and stuff that we built and abandoned, and it was awesome. We loved it.
This is a catapult. All right, ready? That was a good one.
He's gonna jump down. It broke. Oh.
I bring all my Elk Grove friends out here, and they're all jealous. They think we're weird because we have catapults and dirt bikes and we shoot guns and stuff, but I think it's pretty cool.
I appreciate being raised in a place where we just had room to do stuff. We were so busy being kids that we didn't get into trouble, and we didn't do, the things that maybe other kids would do.
She brought a lot of her culture, her Smith culture, into our family. They were raised on 2 acres, and the city engulfed them, but they were still their own little bubble, their little Smith Island out in the middle of Larkspur Lane, and they had goats and pigs and chickens and whatever they could fit on their little 2 acres, and Grandpa was out there in his garden, and eventually the city kind of chased him out and they moved out here. But it's the same way out here. You have to get away from the toxicity of the city. It's really got ideas and entitlement sort of thinking that is a polar opposite from what Mom and Daddy wanted to teach us, and it's polar opposite from what Grandma and Grandpa wanted to teach their kids. And so I think being out here and being isolated, it made us depend on each other.
Well, definitely, I would say definitely. My work ethic came from working on the property and doing projects. because I'm a hard worker. And when I was a kid, we worked a lot. Mommy made us do lots of stuff in the orchard and the garden, and yeah.
I probably spent a year of my life mowing those backfields. And the grass was so tall. I feel like the grass was always taller than I was. And so you'd have to lift the mower up, and you're ramming it with the blade, and there's all sorts of dry grass and weeds and stickers and animals in there. And it was torture. It was the worst. And we would just mow for just hours and hours and hours. We mowed every day of the summer, all of us. And there's a lot of kids, and we all had to mow. It was such a huge job.
Getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning, weeding the garden, trimming the orchard. And that's in the summer, you think you got vacation. No, that's the time to get up and get all your work done.
So the worst job to have in the summer is being the youngest one when we're picking fruit, because the youngest one always has to go on the ground and get all the bad fruit, and you have to decide whether it's good enough to eat or for the chickens, because I don't know, it's just hard to decide.
None of our friends ever wanted to sleep over at our house because they knew they had to work in the garden in the morning.
Maintaining a property, working in the garden every single morning on summer days, waking up at 7 every single morning. And then every time I'd tell, anybody, oh yeah, I wake up every single morning and do a few hours of work before I do stuff, like, oh man, that sucks. My mom just makes me breakfast for me, lets me do whatever I want. I'm like, oh geez, I have to make my own breakfast. It was during the summer, every day, we would have to take turns giving Mommy 4 hours of work.
This is Jonathan digging a hole in the garden. Dig.
Digging.
We're digging a trench so that the laundry water can go out across the garden.
Leech line.
It's a leach line.
And if we didn't give our 4 hours of work, we couldn't do anything. And so all the brothers would go to Van Vleck to go swimming, and I'd be doing my 4 hours of work not going to Van Vleck swimming, and it sucked.
Like waking up at 7 o'clock every morning in the summer and go weed the garden. I knew there was some sort of purpose in that. I hated doing it. Everybody hated it. It was terrible. And one kid had to stay inside and make breakfast, and that was the good job.
It was terrible. You're tired and cold, and Mom was always yelling at you, don't rip the tops off the weeds, you have to get the root.
Hard working, picking up rocks in the garden, weeding, lots of stuff. There was always stuff to do. I once made a list of all the chores growing up. Oh, it was very long.
It really defined our character. Out here there's hard work, and that's one of Mama's things that she always talks about. You can't just have kids with all this time on their hands. You got to have things for them to do. Even Aunt Janetta, she says, well kids, it's time to move that rock pile. I don't know if you ever heard about that, but
No, actually I didn't.
she has this rock pile with all these river rocks, and they're just sitting there at her house. And so every so often, she would tell the kids, okay, well, I need this room, and she would just make up some reason why she needed it moved. And then she'd get her kids together and say, okay, over the next week or so, I need this pile moved. And her boys would get out there, all right, I've got to move these, and they'd work things out, and okay, you do this, and I'll do that, okay, and it's like, and they'd get it moved, but it was like not very important to her, but the work was, and the cooperation. When who was it? David and Sean were having such a hard time, and Mama said, that's it, you boys, go build that fence. They were out there just mad at each other, just as mad as they could be, and by the end of the week, they had a fence. And they had a tolerable working relationship, which, got them through a few years. That was an important step.
I think the worst punishment I ever got was having to build that fence with Sean. That was the worst.
I remember Mommy was going to pay me to build a fence in the backyard. And then me and David got in a fight. And then me and him had to build it for free. And so I feel like I got the worst end of that, because I was the one that was going to get paid to build it. Pretty sure I built like 80% of that fence anyways.
You know what? But they let me have sneakers because they knew I loved horses, and they let me have that freedom. And they knew that it would either cure me of my horse fantasies, or I think they were hoping it would cure me. But it taught me how to work hard, because they told me, you know, if you want this, you do it. And here you have this opportunity with somebody who has a horse that's unmanageable or whatever, so they don't want it. If you can do it, you can keep it.
And I remember that we did a lot of the work. And even before we moved here, I remember us girls, we had our shovels out and we were helping put in the patio. And we were not helping. But Mom and Daddy had us out there, and we were shoveling, you know, like 3 rocks at a time. We're having this really hard work. But we were still out there doing it. I remember Mama used to pay us. But she used to pay us just a pittance. But it was so much money to us, because we never had hardly anything. But she would pay us to get those big fat green tomato worms. You put them in a bucket. Or when I had kids, she paid them to get snails off of her leafy greens. And they'd fill up this bucket full of snails, and they'd bring in the bucket, Grandma, we got them! And all the snails had crawled to the top, and they're peering out with all their eyes like this. You're like, take that to the chickens! But it's to the point that, you know, now that I'm an adult, I'm looking around thinking, okay, I've got 0.2 acres. I'm going to have me a chicken house. And so I've got 4 chickens, and my sister's talking me into getting some ducks, but
one of the biggest reasons I enjoyed growing up in property is because we had animals. I enjoyed them. I enjoyed playing with them and wrestling with them and doing all the things we did with the animals. I think my favorite animals were the pigs. My least favorite animals were definitely the goats and Scooter. Didn't like Scooter. Somehow he made it into the family picture.
one of the reasons why we had animals was, 1, to be self-sufficient, but 2, to teach our children, the kids in the family, character and give us the sorts of experiences that we needed to become responsible people.
Woohoo! If one of those horses sticks their head through, Frenchie's gonna. He's like, hey. I'm taking him off the cloth. He might.
Take the picture if you want to take the picture.
I'm taking a video right now.
Ugh.
Hey, Jonathan, show the frog.
No, not the video.
Come here, go.
Just lift him.
There he is.
Okay. Don't squirt me.
They like it.
Daddy, I think, is just an amazing person. When you look at, you know, the culture that he came from, it was completely different from Mama's upbringing. He didn't have a dad, and his mom worked, and his grandma tried to raise him the best that they could, and they did the best that they could, but they weren't in the church. They didn't have a lot of super positive influence, and he said to me once, and I think that it's totally correct. He said, I feel like that one of my callings in life is to stop all the nonsense, the emotional baggage and nonsense that went on when I was growing up, and, you know, emotional tugging back and forth and rejection and all that sort of thing, and just to stop that and have a normal, healthy family, and to be able to stop the traditions that roll from generation to generation and start new. And that's really what he did. And he kind of, it's like he plucked himself off and put himself on a new tree and said, graft, I'm going to be here. I'm not going to be over there anymore. I'm going to be here. And he adopted all the ways of his wife. You know, Mama has a lot of culture. She's just steeped in a certain way of life. And it's about 100 years behind everybody else in the culture, you know, in the country. But but he, you know, he was learning that culture right along with his kids, and he adopted it and he learned it, and he is out here weeding and watering trees and puttering around in the garden, and that's not what he grew up with. He changed in so many ways, and learning how to have kids. You know, he had one brother and no dad, no role model. He didn't know how to be a dad, and he got baptized in the church, and he learned a little bit as he went, but he was having kids faster than he was learning, and he still he did a great job. He did the best that he could do, and he consistently made progress in, you know, being more patient, being more loving, doing all the things he never had growing up. And I think that takes a lot of growth.
I mean, Daddy, he was a workaholic. He would just, I don't know how many businesses he started, and he would drive along, like he would drive and be gone. He'd be gone on overnight trips and stuff, just trying to work really hard and get his businesses going to pay for everything, and be a total workaholic. But on the other hand, family came first. Like always, family with us, family came first. I mean, we have tons of stories of flying over the railroad tracks on Green Road when somebody's hurt or needs to go to the doctor, or mommy's in labor, or, you know, he just, all the hard work he did was so that he could accomplish having a family.
Well, when we were growing up, I guess I didn't really notice it as much as I do now, that he is helpful and he stands there and says, what can I do? And that's a good example of being serviceable. And he's always prepared for things. He always has, like, the emergency kit. We say, do you have a flashlight? And he brings out 5. Which one do you want? So
no matter what happens in this world, if you do your best to, you know, to prevent problems with your family, then you've done your responsibility. It's your responsibility to take care of your family, no matter what is happening around you. It's your responsibility. And he always took that very seriously, and I think we all see that.
When David got hurt, I don't know. The legend goes he made it from Carmichael to Wilton in 15 minutes or something. I don't know how long it was, but he was there really fast. When somebody needs something, he is dependable, and he prepares so much. He never wants to be caught in a situation where someone can say, Mike Meyer did not prepare enough.
When I was about 4 years old, I remember I had to have been about 4, because we didn't have the bunk bed yet. And I remember waking up in the morning, they had a bedpost on each corner of the bed, and it was just flat on top. And on top of the bedpost was a little Ritz cracker. And it was good. It was really good, and I knew it was from Daddy. And I was so grateful that he gave me that Ritz cracker.
But Daddy used to wrestle. We used to wrestle with Daddy a lot. He'd call us squirrely girlies and tickle us, and we'd pile like 3 or 4 of us on his back and go for a ride.
Well, one of my favorites for sure is the time we went dirt biking out the Forest Hill, and you drove your bike up a tree, and you had a key in your pocket, and it kind of stabbed your leg, and you had the biggest bruise. But it always makes me laugh how basically Jack had to trick you to get you out to get you to drive the dirt bike back out. That's probably that's one of the stories that makes me laugh the most.
My favorite thing to do with Daddy was always fishing. We didn't start doing that until I was a teenager, but it was something that I was always really glad to go and do with him. It was just time alone spent where we could just go out and be ourselves. And I always enjoyed it, even though, well, maybe I enjoyed it just because Daddy never caught anything until my mission, but anyway.
And we go fishing, what felt like, you know, it might have been all day. And we never caught anything. We'd go all day and never catch anything. We'd go months and just not catch fish. But for some reason it was still fun.
Whenever he had to go to the gas station just to fill up some gas or something, I'd always beg to go just so I could get an icy. So yeah. Also, I'm sure everyone else has said this, but fishing's always fun with Daddy.
That he would always throw us on bed, like it was, the water bed, so it's all over the place, and he would throw us really high and we'd splat right on the bed, and that was really fun.
I would have to say that my favorite memory with Daddy is the fact that my 10th birthday on 4th of July, there was a dirt bike outside wrapped in a giant wooden box. And we went out and we opened it, and there was a dirt bike outside. There was the spanking stick, and it had hearts on it. Let's spank me with it. I don't even know what I would do, but Mommy would carry a stick around the yard and whip us with it if we were bad.
Getting spanked was like a punishment for the younger kids, probably 10 and under. You didn't get spanked when you were older. And Mommy had a carved piece of wood. I think someone gave it to her for Mother's Day. It said "World's Greatest Mom" or something, and it had hearts on it. And I guess it was a really good weight for spanking, because she'd always spank us with it.
I remember getting spanked. I remember holding my hands behind my butt and getting my hands whipped.
They would usually give us a choice. They say, do you want to spend an hour in your room, or do you want to spank? And spending an hour in your room was tough, because there was always kids around. There was nothing to do in your room, and you could always hear all the excitement outside. People running back and forth and yelling, and you just couldn't take being in your room alone. It was awful. So we'd usually just try to get it over with quick and go for the spank. And you'd bend over and you'd put your hands on your butt, and she'd say, "Move your hands." And you're like, "Okay." You'd move your hands and she'd spank you, and right before she spanked you, you'd slip your hands back in there, and so she whacked your knuckles, which would probably hurt more than getting spanked. I don't know why you'd always try to sneak your hands back there. But then she'd say, "Well, your hands were in the way, we gotta do it again." Oh.
I remember one time somebody forgot to feed the chickens and water them. And if you forgot to feed the chickens and water them, don't expect milk at dinner, because if they're thirsty, you're thirsty. And if they're hungry, guess who else is going to be hungry?
There's certain jobs, like weeding the garden, if you skipped a day, it's okay. It happens. But milking the goats, if you skip even a half a day, they're out there suffering. You gotta do your work, you gotta do your responsibilities. And no one else is going to do it for you.
Anytime we would get in trouble during the summer, she would make us go and pick a 5-gallon bucket full of weeds, and you had to fill it completely full, and you had to, whenever we told her that it was done, Mama would always come out, look at it, and it'd be full, and then she would step on it, she'd get in the bucket and start bouncing on it and squishing it down. And as soon as it was squished down, she would say, "Okay, come and get me when it's full."
I remember Mom, we were bad kids and we didn't do the dishes when we were supposed to. And there was a few times where she would get up at 5 in the morning and kick us out of bed and say, "Get in there and you do those dishes." And we'd had to do it in the cold water that we'd left from the night before. And it was dark and we were crying.
And I know now it's better to just get in and wash the dishes instead of taking 2 hours to do it. The same with cleaning your room. I've learned that lesson. Didn't learn it then. Learned it now.
Alright, so things I got punished for. Normal bickering and fighting. Picking on Jonathan. Doing random things like that. Fighting with Jesse. I don't know, I remember as a little kid we watched too much TV, and parents came in and they just pulled the cord and just cut it right in front of us. It was traumatizing.
We would watch TV, not a lot, but I think we watched TV quite a bit, and Mommy would get mad and tell us to go outside and turn off the TV all the time. And it'd be like right in the middle of a cartoon, and it was the worst thing ever, because the plot of the cartoon is going along, and then all of a sudden you have to turn it off. And it was the worst. And sometimes she would cut the cord on the TV. She wasn't afraid to do that.
For some reason, Mommy just didn't like us watching TV. There's something that irked her about us watching TV. We have all this land to play on, and you guys want to sit in front of the couch and watch TV. And so we'd always sneak it. We'd always turn the volume way down low. It was the best on Friday nights when Mommy and Daddy would go out, because we'd always watch TV. and that was when Boy Meets World was on. I snuck a pair of Mommy's heels and put them on, and I went outside and I opened the front door and walked in, and it made that clicking sound on the wood, and it was so obvious, all the kids scrambling, "Hey, turn off the TV!" running in all the different corners of the house trying to pretend like we weren't watching.
The things I remember about Mama is Mama had a really strong personality, but it was kind of a quiet sort of a strength. She had super thick skin and she could let amazing things roll off. You know, teenagers throw a lot of junk, and it didn't matter what you threw at her. It seemed like she would just let it roll off, and she would just love you regardless. She didn't let you get away with it, but she'll love you regardless of what you said.
Like, she's always talking about her pet peeve is when people say, "Oh, I could never do that. I could never butcher a chicken." Well, of course you can. You mean if your kids were starving and you had a bunch of chickens, you wouldn't butcher them? Of course you would. And I could just see her giving that speech at church. Somebody in the hall.
She loves learning. She taught us the love of learning, to love things, to be passionate about things.
And we always knew that she loved us. One of the things that I remember when I moved away to college was that she started talking about her list, that she had a list and we were all on it. And finally when we were married and gone from the house, she says, "You know, finally I feel like I can mark you off my list. I don't have to count heads in the car and wonder, where's Angela?" But the reality is she never really did, mark us off her list. She is constantly calling us or wondering about us or anything, things like that. But she cared about every single one of us, and she thought about every single one of us. And her list is one of the things that made me realize that when I was gone, she missed me.
Just the ability and the example she is to me of just, I don't know how to say it, to find the joy in the journey, to say. She seems like, you always seem like the kind of person that's happy, that you take what life throws at you and you make the best out of it.
I have never heard my mom complain. Never.
Traveling with Mommy was really fun. We would sing. I don't know if you guys remember singing. We would sing. We would learn our genealogy. She would tell the stories of our ancestors and learning songs. A lot of drinking songs. I don't know why.
Some of the songs are weird.
Yeah, they are. They don't make sense because they're not for our time, but here they are.
I am grateful that our parents took us to family reunion because I love road trips. I love going out of state and camping, and those road trips are some of the biggest memories of my childhood. Like going to family reunion, camping, and hanging out with cousins, and I'm glad they were kind of big on that. And I know Grandpa Kermit was big on that, and that's probably why Mommy was.
One of my favorite things that I remember when I was a little kid is sitting under the sewing table with Mommy, under the sewing table, and she would read us Little House on the Prairie. It was really cool.
I think we just all enjoyed being around Mommy. When we were bored or we had nothing to do, or at least I'd go sit on her waterbed and just talk with her. And I was a teenager, and I think teenagers don't usually like their moms, but I really liked mine.
My favorite memory with Mama is all of us curling up on the couch, and Mama would sit in the middle, and we would all curl around her, and she would read to us books. My favorite was always Farmer Boy, because when Mama read it, it just you could feel the smells, and you smell the smells and taste the taste, and the food always made you hungry.
And I remember one time, I don't know, I just had this desire in my heart that my mom would have more kids, and it was, to think back on it, that's probably pretty unusual, but I just wanted my mom to have a baby, and I didn't know why it was important to me, but it really was. And I remember going back into that tent and lying down on the bed and just praying, "Heavenly Father, help Mama to have a baby. I just think that it would be so wonderful to have a baby." And it wasn't very long after that when my mom, who was helping with the remodel, she was painting the ceiling in her bedroom, and she says, "I was just painting and painting and painting, and then all of a sudden I got to halfway through one of the stripes with the roller, and whoa, I felt sick." And that was Jesse. And I just remember thinking, Heavenly Father does answer prayers. Huh.
I've never asked my mom why she decided to have 10 kids. But I'm really, really grateful that she at least made it to 7.
They were not afraid to have kids. They weren't afraid to raise a big family. And I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that they gave us the attitude that it can be done. And not only can it be done, but it's desirable, because it was really fun being raised with not only 2 parents, but also all these friends.
Just overall, I think that we had a really, really blessed childhood.
So I'm thankful for being raised in a really big family, because that's just awesome.
I'm thankful for the constant testimony bearing. Everything's connected. Everything comes from a loving Heavenly Father. And everything they did is like bearing their testimony to us.
If my parents' only achievement was to stick it out together and just to be there for us, I'd consider myself really lucky. And they gave us so much more than that. I really appreciate that.
So grateful that you are our family, that we came here, and that you were willing to stick it out and have a big family and do all the hard work that it takes to have a big family and to live where we live and to teach us all the values,
Just being there for us and caring that we did well.
I am thankful that you are my parents and that you raised us well, and that I know how to be a person that can hold her own, and I love you lots.
I have nice clothes, a car, that they taught us how to work. I can do things on my own, that I've learned to be independent. That's what I'm thankful for.
And taking us to church, 10 kids to church, I'm sure was not easy. And doing all the things that you guys did, that shaped us and it made us who we are. And thank you.